does he stand by his statement in relation to trade with Saudi Arabia that an FTA gives us yet another reason for those relationships to grow and be closer together?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, my statement actually referred to the potential free trade agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council, which covers 6 Gulf states. I stand by my statement, and the FTA with that group gives another reason for relationships to grow and be closer together and more focused for our businesses.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
To the Prime Minister, why is he giving preferential treatment to a regime that has beheaded 72 people this year, 3 of whom were beheaded the day he flew out?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I don't think you can say we're giving preferential treatment. What we are doing is trading with Saudi Arabia and with other countries that make up the Gulf Cooperation Council. That's not actually new. The member probably knows that our trade with the Gulf states is our 5th largest. In fact, we sell more exports to the Gulf states than we do to the United Kingdom. So actually we've been doing trade for a long period of time. 18 businesses and senior business leaders came with me because they actually see this as a market of opportunity. And then the last question, I just had the Leader of the Opposition telling me they wanted us to do more in terms of exports. Well, that's what we were doing last week, leading a trade delegation to grow our exports.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Has he raised human rights with the Saudi regime, and will he make any preferential trade agreement conditional on human rights being improved and beheadings being stopped?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
In terms of the latter part of the question, no. In terms of the former part of the question, yes. In fact, we had quite an extensive discussion with King Salman, and we did raise human rights. And actually, I might make the point that we did not only raise it and have a reasonably extensive discussion, but we did more than President Obama did, who didn't actually raise human rights when he went to Saudi.
Order. 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 Supplementary question, James Shaw. Order. 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 I'm on my feet. I've called for order again to allow Mr Shaw to ask a supplementary question. The barrage continued. I will now be asking somebody to leave the chamber to demonstrate that we've got to have a level of decorum while questions are being asked. James Shaw, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Prime Minister. So, given that he has raised beheadings and human rights abuses with the Saudi regime, what evidence does he have that the Saudi regime is improving its human rights and stopping beheadings as a result of our trade agreement with them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't have the details of their record in this area over time with me, but what I would say, though, is there's 2 ways of approaching these things, isn't it? I mean, one is ultimately one of isolation and one is engagement. And if the member is suggesting that we should put Saudi Arabia into the camp of isolation, that's a legitimate argument you can make, but I'd say we also don't agree with the death penalty in countries like the United States. And is he really arguing because Texas executes people, we should actually have an isolationist policy when it comes to the United States? My experience as Prime Minister is that when you have good trading relationships, when you get to know people better, you can have more fruitful discussions, and actually over time I think you genuinely see change. I'm not saying Saudi Arabia has a record that we want in human rights, but the evidence that people at least on the ground suggested to me is that over the last few decades it has improved a bit.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
So does he stand by his statement to this House, quote, "I will not stand by when people out there are being beheaded," end quote, or does that only apply to trading partners?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I absolutely stand by that statement, and there is a difference between a country that has its own constitution, its own laws, and decides to follow those laws, and the actions of a terrorist group. I might not agree, and I don't agree, with the death penalty, but as I said to the member, it's not solely unique to Saudi Arabia. It's also true in the United States and other countries. It happens to be true, as we know from last week, in Indonesia. In the end, actually, there's quite a lot of difference between a country and a terrorist group like ISIL.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
So does he think it makes any difference to the people who are being beheaded whether they are being beheaded by the Saudi regime or by ISIL?
Oh, right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, look, I think the member's actually better than a sort of somewhat flippant question. When people die, it's a terrible thing. And so I don't agree with beheadings, but I'm just saying people live in that country and they are the rules and laws of that country, just like we have rules and laws over here that people might not agree with.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
So how bad would human rights abuses have to be in another country for New Zealand not to give preferential trade treatment to that country?
Speaker,
The right Honourable Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
I don't think we are giving preferential treatment. What we are trying to do is negotiate a free trade agreement which allows access on a more beneficial footing to both parties, and this happens to be the Gulf states, which is Saudi being one of those 6 partners. If the member's argument is that we shouldn't actually negotiate free trade agreements with countries that have human rights records that we don't agree with, then you could apply that to quite a number of countries, and they were countries that the previous government also signed free trade agreements with.